In 2 seconds, we'll be live. Ready? And to go.
Good evening. Welcome to our January Finance Committee meeting. We will begin by introducing board members, starting
Chris McGlone.
Becky Fless,
Jack Pitteroff.
Megan Carlson,
administrative staff.
Pat Hopkins, Superintendent.
Andrea Dish, Business Manager.
Dave Dostey, Director of Operations.
Excellent. And we have a guest tonight, Tom Seekins. So we will move ahead with energy management consultants.
So we invited Tom here to present some information on ways in which the board might be interested in doing an energy reduction project. Many of you, oh no, probably Becky, you're the only one that's still on the board that will remember a few years back, we did a similar project with Tom as part of a different company. And so now Tom is here again to present some analysis that he's already done and some data. So I will just turn it over to you.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yes, I was with Siemens for almost 20 years. I ran their energy group. EMC was actually the company that did a lot of the work, actual work with Siemens. So I had a long relationship with EMC, and then I came over as the managing president of EMC about 3 years ago. It was a natural progression. We're a local company out of Portland, been around about 30 years. We have employees throughout New Hampshire and Vermont, but we're Portland based, so most of our stuff is in Maine. 30 years in Maine, but so the conversation started with energy audit, but also infrastructure audits in the district. So trying to figure out which schools are going to stay today and which schools will be around in the future. Thought that, through the performance contracting process. So just because I'm doing a presentation today means absolutely nothing in regards to partnering with EMC. You're still going to have to follow the procurement law, which is you advertise for companies of interest, and then you'd interview them, and there's a few steps you have to follow before you can select a partner. But the general process is you can do a report like this, and I've shown an example report now. It'll be up on the screen, I'm sure. Is to show what you can actually do through the analysis. So it's not just energy, of course, it's infrastructure as well. Because when we're walking through, our engineers, we have HVAC personnel, engineers, different partners for different specialties that we bring in on our team to look at certain aspects of the buildings. But it's a natural fit to look at things like LED conversions in the classroom, but also looking at the general DNA of the facilities, right? So it'll help you guys understand where things are at infrastructure wise, while we're looking at things that are energy related. So in addition to energy reduction, it's also, do you have adequate fresh air in the classrooms? Do you have other heating plants, working okay? Is there things that are in jeopardy from that perspective? Like gas iron sectional boilers and converting to gas or things like that. So those are the obvious things, but while we're doing it, we do building envelope studies. So we get, above the ceilings and behind the walls and do, infrared imaging. So we find out how's the infrastructure of the buildings. And I think that'll also help you guys when you're deciding the next phase or future of some of the facilities that, have been around a long time, and maybe you're considering merging facilities. I mean, all school systems are kind of the same, right? They all use this process, which, by the way, doesn't cost the district any money upfront, which I think is probably the biggest allure to it all. We're a little bit different than like an architectural and engineering firm, where we will have PEs, engineers on our team that run the buildings, but we're looking at this as if the projects that we would actually implement after the fact, not just doing, a general analysis. We're looking at things that actually you could implement and construct, which us as an ESCO energy services company, that's what we would do. Much like all the others that may respond to this RFQ that you put on the street. So with that, Terry, I'm gonna
Just share again, will you? Go ahead and share again.
It's up on my screen. Not sure what happened
Hang on
there.
a second.
It was up on the.
Can you just unplug and then plug back in again?
Let's try it. Oh, there we go. So I can zoom in if you'd like, but this is an example of a report we just did for a school system. And it's fairly inclusive. I mean, you'll find almost anything you're gonna be looking at. We looked at everything from, as you can see in the matrix here in the table of contents, is the indoor air quality, which is obviously any type of ventilation equipment throughout the facilities, security, life safety, access, accessibility, cameras, access control, fire alarm, sprinkler systems, general indoor air quality, not just energy related, but everything, building automation systems, miscellaneous exterior weatherization, window replacement, door replacement. There's no shortage of that throughout the school system, I'm sure. Much like every school system that we look at, those are the places that are pretty obvious things. But roofing, VRF, also known as heat pumps, it's kind of the similar, technology, as you know. Sure, we've heard a lot of those buzzwords, but that's under the sustainability category here. Looking at solar, ADA compliance things like in the bathrooms. If you're redoing some of the bathrooms in terms of energy efficiency, it's, there's more efficient faucets. Of course, I know that, wireless urinals are not of an attraction here, but there's other options, to make them more efficient, slow down water flow, useless water flow. But at the same time, make sure you have that 60 inches of wheelchair clearance in the middle of the room. I mean, you're making renovations already, do it at the same time, right? It's minimal cost. So that's why I say it's quite a bit different than just looking at energy. You're looking at kind of everything. And of course, no one assumes that you're going to do all these projects. So what you do is you take these reports, right? And this really helps you create a capital plan. Not only figure out what you're going to do with the schools in your future, it also is a capital planning tool. But it also, you're benchmarking it against things like ASHRAE standards for all this equipment, which we've kind of delineated here. It would be, all right, so such and such air handler at whichever school is beyond its useful life. Well, based on what? Well, we provide all that information, as I'm sure most companies would, so that you see where, the end of life is for all your equipment. Because, outside of staff salaries, energy is probably one of your biggest, if not the biggest expense. And then secondary to that is your HVAC equipment. You probably have $50 million in just HVAC equipment throughout all your schools. So it's a significant amount of money when you're talking about what you actually maintain for all schools. So as you go through the report, we create this capital planning matrix, which we kind of color coded. So each building is here, has its own column. This is each school. And on the left-hand side, you see which particular equipment that we're looking at. And then the red, yellow, and the green would represent what we feel based on things like, is it a really quick payback? Are there considerable incentives from Efficiency Maine to do some of these measures? That might be red because it's an absolute no-brainer. Take advantage of free money while you can. Or it's imminent for failure, right? If you have a boiler that's 50 years old, it's already leaking, you've had issues with it, that would be red. It's not just our red, it would be a conversation that we would have with you guys or any company you choose would have before you start an audit. You have to sit down, hey, what are your expectations of this audit when you're done, right? So we would then kind of get together and say, red, yeah, I agree, that's your red, and that's how we built this tool. But it really helps when you first see all this information come back. There's 112 measures that we identified for this one school system, right? That's a lot. I mean, one measure would be a boiler. So when you're talking 112, there's a tremendous amount of data here. You're not going to do all these things. This is a $35 million project that's all selected here. This particular customer is probably going to break it into 4 phases, right? Do a $3 million project, then another one, and another one. Just getting the things that are mostly red and eminent for failure, or again, have an attractive incentive tied to it. It helps your eyes get to it too, because not everyone has expertise in all these fields. So when you're looking at the thing, you're going, all right, let's look at the reds first and then go from there, because that's obviously what we should be focusing on. And of course, based on the school, you'll know whether or not you have an appetite to make improvements in that school or wait, that's your choice, obviously. So that's what this kind of report does. And that's a brief synopsis of, probably 4 months of an analysis. But then you go through the report and then you have pictures always help, right? You have a picture of the boiler room, the existing conditions, and then recommendations based on the existing conditions. So right now that boiler plant was okay, but at this particular school, this one is eminent, 0 to 2 years. You should, for various reasons, a couple of boilers were leaking, so on and so forth. So you go through of course, as you can see here, this is all the boiler rooms in this particular school system and how they were ranked. And there's a write-up for each one. Then you get into things like ventilation, ERV wheels. This is a good depiction of the kind of data that we actually pull. So we really get in, this is the inside of a heat wheel inside of an energy recovering ventilation unit above the ceiling. So you would otherwise never see this as an issue. But as a consultant, we're not a service provider, right? So we're looking at this entirely differently. We're looking at this as if we know what's actually what it should look like. And then we make these recommendations of you clearly should have a crack in your heat wheel here. This is a pretty serious issue that should be fixed. And then you go back to your service provider if you'd like. You can generate bid documents and things like that to get the stuff repaired, but that's how it actually ends up, the work ends up getting done. But these are the kind of things you identify that you wouldn't just walk by and see normally. You actually have to take the covers off the stuff, dive into it, make sure it's, the actual condition is what it is. Because a lot of companies you'll see, I've seen reports come back where they go up to the nameplate on a piece of equipment and we call it like a nameplate study. You'll take a picture of it and say, it was installed in 1998. It's got plenty of life left on it. Well, just because it was installed in 98 doesn't mean it was serviced correctly since 1998, right? So if you have a car that has 150,000 miles on it, you haven't changed the oil in it, you haven't maintained it correctly, it's clearly not going to be in the same operational condition as a car that you've maintained well. I mean, as a simple analogy. So tearing it apart, really getting behind the cover is really what matters here. And then there's pretty obvious things like this air conditioning unit that has grass growing out of it. That's probably something we considered imminent, which you can see here it is. That should be replaced. That's the piece of air conditioning.
Green air conditioning, it's energy, it's environmentally fresh.
Right. I guess, yeah, it could be a green roof.
That's green one, yeah.
Once again, this is pneumatic controls inside an air handler. We were told that there's really no pneumatics left in the school, but we found plenty of them by taking things apart and looking behind the jackets of the equipment. Well, that's still pneumatic, and because you took out the compressor, it doesn't work anymore. So those are the kind of things that you find, right? And this is not, our job is not to make the incumbent service provider look bad. We're your consultant. We're totally Switzerland in the approach of, we don't want to install anything that holds you here for the next 20 years. We're just a consultant. It's our job to identify things that are in imminent repair, things that are fine. And we provide you that information, and then you can make those adjustments, But so this report, again, is probably a combination of about 4 months of 4 engineers going through it from EMC. And then if there's something like very specific that we should be looking at that you already have a contract with that does maybe sprinkler systems or your cameras or access control, you don't want to, if it's working well, you don't want to, disrupt the apple cart perspective from that perspective. You want to bring them in, make sure they give their opinion. Oh yeah, we've quoted that over the last 5 years. They have my numbers for that. Oh, great. Can we have that information, update it, put it in your report so that it's part of your capital planning matrix? But I think you get a general feel of the way these reports go, right down to building automation, a big deal for schools. It's really, it's the engine that keeps all of your boiler rooms, ventilation, temperature controls, thermostats in every school classroom back to one platform that Gabe runs. Replacing these moving forward, a big part of that for us is to make sure that we drum up a bid document, a scope, should you want to replace some of the older stuff that makes it open moving forward, so that we create a bid spec that doesn't lock you into any one provider for the foreseeable future, right? It gives you flexibility, gives you the ability to say, okay, hey, we lost a panel, and if it's proprietary and only one company can replace it, that price might be vastly different than if you could have 5 companies look at it. I think you'd see the price drop drastically if that were the case. So that's another big piece of this, is making sure that whether it's building automation, lighting controls, fire alarm devices, it doesn't matter what it is, to make sure that you're not stuck in a situation where you're held hostage to any one provider after the project, right? So you have the ability to pick and choose who you want. So
Can I just stop,
Yeah.
Tom? I think that is something that's really important that I want to highlight, because that has not been the case. And many school districts, including our own, we have one company currently who services all of our HVAC systems, and that's it. So we don't have the opportunity to necessarily get the best price, right? There's no competition. There's no bidding process. So I just wanted to point that out.
Well, you're right. It is a very common thing, and it's not to say that the companies that you're with and you know, various school systems, we're doing this for now for Oxford schools, for Poland schools, Ellsworth schools. We're doing it all over the Freeport schools. Everyone has, we're doing these same exact analysis for those school systems as we speak, and everyone's different. They all have different providers. But there's a fairly common theme there that they're all with that same provider for a long time. And they all do kind of feel as though, well, we're kind of stuck here. Well, you're not. There are ways in which you can create bid specs that allow you to start implementing a non-proprietary control system that works in conjunction with what you have, right? There are ways to do that. So that's a big piece of this analysis, right? Because it is very costly. And a lot of this stuff is very old, like you can see in these pictures. I mean, these things are computers that are running the ventilation, fresh air, and the heat in your classrooms. Fairly important piece of equipment. And there's a computer that just runs all the time. So it's not going to last forever, but you want to make sure you have the ability to choose whoever you really want. So yeah, this is a big piece of it. This is on automation, as you can see. Every school system was laid out, the good, the bad, the ugly, and then you provide all this information. Once we go through, and then again on the camera side of it, as you can see, that's green. Camera's fine. Once you go through this information, you find out, you know, the most attractive aspects to this report. And then you bring it all back to a spreadsheet that looks like this. And I'll zoom in because I'm sure you guys can't see that, right? Is that better?
That's better, yes.
So what you do is you take all of these things per school, and you'll see across the top there, heating plant improvements, domestic hot water plant improvements, that's the wheel that was broken. Operational savings, energy savings, associated rebates or incentives, new project cost, its priority, and then across the side here, you see all schools and all measures kind of listed out. And what happens is that this thing allows you to say, okay, let's just do a look at priority one measures. So then you can go back over here and say all priority one measures, which are red, and you can see here, there's a tremendous amount, and I'm just going to kind of slowly show you all the different things: hazardous material remediation, air handler replacement, door replacements, roof replacement, of course, LED improvements, building automation upgrades, window, door, and so on and so forth. So you price this all out. And again, what's quite a bit different about this process is that you're building in the actual cost, savings, and rebates, incentives to do said measures, right? Not just a report that you put in a 3-ring binder that says you have deficiencies. I mean, that's kind of antiquated process, you know, and we don't really do energy audits, so to speak, anymore. Because what ends up happening is it sits on someone like Gabe's desk and it shows you that, yeah, I have about $35 million worth of deficiencies, something you already knew. What you're trying to do is figure out a way in which, how can we compartmentalize this and create a capital plan moving forward of things that we should really do now in the schools that we know are here for the foreseeable future, right? And then you phase it out. So what you end up doing is you turn that into a cash flow. And again, I'll zoom in here. This is kind of like probably in Andrea's wheelhouse for sure. But across the top here is your term of the note. So it's year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, so on and so forth. You guys have done tax exempt lease purchases in the past. It's without question, I've been doing these in schools for 22 years. 99% of the time it's tax exempt lease purchases because there's no cost to issue a tax exempt lease purchase outside of your Drummond Woodson counsel to verify that the documents are all as they should be. But there's no 3 to 5% to issue a bond. You know, this is not a bond. It's a tax exempt lease purchase, and the non-appropriation clause makes it that way. So the non-appropriation clause basically says, unlike a bond, if you were to get rid of said building or whatever, and someone's is going to take over the debt, then you know you're not responsible for that debt associated with that building. Now that's something you'd have to pursue because I think that's already happened here. But you know, technically that's in your contract with the bank. So quite a bit different. Also, it doesn't have to go to a warrant article or a bond referendum if you don't want it to be. You guys can decide upon what you choose. But you can, however you guys want to get that information out to the general public, you certainly can. county website, whatever. So associated with this, all the measures, I chose just the reds, right? So I deselected all the 2s and 3s and said, all right, what does that number look like? So that drills this tool down to say, down at the bottom is $13 million worth of work, right? We'll calculate the end, the contribution is high. So you look at that and say, gosh, that's a lot of money for us to try to contribute every year, which is $650,000 a year to do 13 million. Clearly the things that are chosen didn't have a big energy savings aspect to it. So you go back to your project builder and this tool becomes yours, right? And I can't speak for however other companies develop the projects, but I can just, I'm sure they could do something very similar to it. If you wanted to pick on something you knew, all right, let's look at just lighting, for example. That always has a great payback. You calculate your annual contribution. So it's a $1.3 million project. It costs you nothing because the energy savings makes the payment. Now, Andrea's been through this. So technically you do have a payment. It's not like there's no payment. So you will have principal and interest payment of $77,000, but you've got energy savings, gross energy savings of $98,000. So this is a pretty quick payback in this particular district. This is single digit payback, right? So, but what you're gonna do is you're not gonna take that $98,000 in savings and pull it out of your budget. You leave that into your budget, and that savings is what's gonna be basically moved over to your principal and interest payment for the tax exempt lease purchase for whichever term that you choose. If 15 years is your threshold, then that's it. If it's 10, then that's it, right? So this tool allows you to build that based around the terms that you choose. So if I say, all right, let's make this 10 years and calculate my annual, it still pays for itself within 10 years. If you don't want to take all your down payments and put it towards it, you could say 50% down. So that took your payment down to $93,000. Well, if you do that, you're gonna have to come up with money each year for 10 years. If we put 100% of the incentives down, it's down to that amount, but you're gonna have to go back up in your term. So it really lets you pick and choose what's financially palatable right now, and then plan ahead. The other aspect I think is pretty important to note about the tax exempt lease purchase is that it gives you an entire year of no payments. And it's designed only for schools and municipalities, of course, tax exempt aspect. If you said, okay, our project that we choose is, if you go and actually in July and you push it out to like the end of July, because your fiscal year is July 1, your first payment's actually not due till the 2025 year for July, right? So it gives, and the idea and the intent behind it is that you have a year, just garner those energy savings for the associated measures that you chose to make that payment, right? So it's a pretty sweet endeavor that doesn't really impact your current budget unless you choose things that really don't have a strong payback. Most of the time schools leverage the savings from things like LED conversions and boiler conversions, sealing up the building. Solar is a big deal. Done a lot of those recently, where you take that savings and then you can do things like exterior doors, which are big bucks. You're talking a couple $100,000 easily, and you still wouldn't do all your doors throughout the facility. Windows, things like that, roofs that are big numbers, but they don't have a strong payback. You leverage those with things like LED conversions, and then you may have to come up with, $15,000 a year, but just by clicking on that button, it'll tell you what you have to come up with. And this is all based around the information that the ESCO garners from you in terms of what you're paying per gallon of oil, what you're paying for thermal natural gas, electricity, so on and so forth. You have to, by law, show all those calculations. So these aren't just kind of willy-nilly numbers that our engineers put together and say it probably, finger in the air, looks good. Drummond West is going to go through your contract to make sure that calculations are as they should be and the savings make sense. So
Can I add a few things to
Sure.
what you're saying?
Yeah.
So I just want to remind the committee that our current performance contract annual payment is about $250,000, and it lasts until FY32. And while Tom says that we'll pay for that payment using energy savings, you would not gut all of your accounts, like your electricity account, until you start to see, and reduce those in your budget until you start to see those come down. There are a lot of extenuating circumstances, and, Tom mentioned, supply. If you remember, when we went out to bid for our electricity supply, last year, it almost tripled what we were paying. So we need to make sure that we are able to cover our utility payments, in addition to being able to cover the annual debt of the performance contract. So it's reduce as you go. And, if we were to buy more laptops or things were to change, our energy, our utilities may increase depending upon other things that are done here that we may or may not know about at the time that we do performance contract or the energy audit. So I just don't want anyone here to think that we could just, if it's a $250,000 payment, that I could go in and cut $250,000. There are other extenuating circumstances that we have to take into account. But yes, as Tom said, over the life of this project, you should start to see, or you will start to see your energy costs start to be reduced, unless things go wonky, like they did with the electricity and some of the other things that we've experienced.
Yeah, all very good points of view. You've been through the process, so you kind of know it. I think you focused on more really high payback items, measures than infrastructure things, right? And as you do some of these, Oxford's done several of them, 5 or 6 of these performance contracts, and a lot of school systems just use it because once you select an energy services company as your partner, you can use that same company, obviously barring they do a good job, for 5 years, and you don't have to keep doing this RFQ process. So you can do subsequent projects and then use this capital plan that you and the company you choose can then already know that, hey, in 2026 school year, we should probably do those air handlers at the high school because, or Helen Thompson, you've got the heat pump issue that you're trying to replace all of those. That's a real expense. That's not going away, and it's a big expense. So you can plan out ahead, and the company knows it too, so that you continually just, watch that cost, because everything goes up in cost. One of the questions that we often get, just trying to think of things that maybe some people may forget or forget to ask while we're here, but what if the energy goes up, you're paying whatever per gallon of propane or per kilowatt hour of electricity. Well, if it goes up, then you're just simply gonna use or spend less than you would have if you hadn't done the reduction. Because what the companies are gonna guarantee for savings, should you use that aspect of it, is the units of energy, not the cost. Because you can't control what you're paying right now per therm of gas or per gallon of propane or oil or kilowatt hour of electricity. The only thing you control is the units of energy you're saving. And that's what your calculation is going to prove, right? So if you do a project today and you're paying 18 cents all in per kilowatt hour for electricity, you're guaranteeing however many kilowatt hours of electricity, not the 18 cents. So you're saving that, a couple $100,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, and you're using the current rate. But again, if they go up, you're obviously going to see more savings.
What I will say is this is a great financing mechanism to do the things that we need to do, and we pair it with energy savings. It really is.
So stepping back and the big picture here, and why is Tom here? Why are we talking about this? I want to go back to the Finance Committee's recommendation or request that we move forward with an RFQ, that we look at really pursuing a combined elementary school. With that work, we were advised by Department of Education that we need to put in an application, or we should put in a construction application for every single school. So that's actually on here, a little bit of a follow-up regarding the applications. So through the investigative process, we were trying to explore whether the information that this type of project provided to us, whether it would be sufficient in the eyes of the Department of Education if we attach the information to an application for a new construction. We learned that it would not be, that we really do need to employ some type of architectural engineering firm to get additional information. However, this is really good supporting information that will support that application.
Right.
And what we don't know is if the application's open, I think I'm hearing around the summer that they may open, that if we submit those applications and we find that once again, our schools are extremely far from being funded, right? And we still have these buildings that if you are interested in pursuing something like this, that then we have the data,
Mhm.
right? And so then we're in a position where we're not wasting another year
Right.
trying to decide what we're going to do. We already have the data, and you can reflect on that and decide, you know what, we're not going to get a new high school, a new middle school, and 4 new elementary schools or a combined school. So this is what's critical. This is what we need to do moving forward. So let's focus on it. So that's what I really like about this, is it just gives us some additional insight that could help speed up the planning process.
Yeah.
So in another year or two, we've got the information that we need and we know how to proceed.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and inclusive of that, Pat, too, but things like revolving renovation funds, school revolving renovation funds, as they pop up, as that pot kind of fills itself, as you know how those work, right? You know, they come back as people are paying back into them, and 0% portion of it is forgiven based on your free reduced lunch percentage and other mechanisms. I don't know all the aspects of it, but last year we did a bunch of these for schools. So this information can be used for things like that as well.
Mhm.
So say things are priority 2 or 3, in our terminology, that's something that's 3 to 5 years or more that you could wait. But this year, it was priority 1 measures that the Department of Education wanted, which was life safety, ventilation, even exterior ramps, ADA compliance aspects of things in your facilities. And so we used a lot of this information to help schools apply for those funds. So you can use it for that as well. It's pretty powerful, like you said, in terms of whatever comes down the pike in terms of funding, you can use it for that. And maybe that's something you wait on. Right?
Yeah, that's really helpful
That's very
information
helpful, yeah.
because
And that's
we just received last year a revolving fund grant, but we know that there's more that needs to be done, and we're actually talking about future
Right, we're just
submittals.
talking about future projects
Yeah.
and how, you know, maybe we could put some of the future projects that are in our 5-year capital improvement plan and do those revolving renovation
Yeah.
projects that way and do the applications that way. And I mean, to me, this is, I do the 5-year capital improvement plan, which I'll go over, but this is basically all of the data that we need to do the 5-year capital improvement plan. That's basically the way I look at it. This is
Yeah.
all of the bones of all of our schools and the data that we should have, and we really need to gather up to use all that information.
And
Absolutely.
just as a follow through on TC Hamlin, which was one of the schools that was in the performance contract, when we sold that school, we did not walk away from the debt in it. We paid some of it off and the rest of it was refinanced. So that's how that was handled. So if depending upon certainly the construction applications, the state construction applications, I think we need to consider that in tandem with this information. And go ahead.
I would say I completely agree with you. However,
Yep.
I also know that the Department of Education just added 2 additional schools to their list to be funded. And I think those schools have been waiting for close to 10 years. So even if you were to do something now, or even if you were to be approved in the next couple years, who knows how long it will actually be until a school is ready for students to occupy. It could be years.
Yeah,
could always choose our projects based on the length of payback. I mean, this current project that we have, we currently owe payback until 2032. It doesn't mean that we would have to choose a project that long in length or payback that long. However, the shorter the payback, usually the higher the annual payment, and it's an annual payment, so.
You can also go through and figure out, so we just did an LED conversion for all of RSU two, and that was when they were together with Richmond, right? And during the process, they were just kind of like this beforehand. It's fairly certain we're gonna separate, or Richmond's gonna pull out from our district. If that were the case, can we isolate the cost for the LED conversion? Because it was a pretty big project. I think it was about $1 million just for the lighting. And so we wanted to extrapolate the cost associated with just those buildings so they could take over that debt, which I think they did with success. So as long as you set it up beforehand, you know that something might happen with this particular school, then you can pull that debt associated with the projects that you did with each facility ahead of time. So it's much easier and cleaner. So that, okay, if you're taking these schools over, just so you know, you have a payment associated with whatever you did for projects. Just as a, I don't even know why I just said that, but hopefully it makes sense.
Yeah.
It made sense.
Okay.
It did. Other questions, I would say, for Tom? Tom does have to drive back to Portland, so
Alright.
knowing the storm is
Scouts in
coming.
the car.
And Scout's in the car.
Yeah, and he has a dog in the car, right?
If he needs to come in and run around for a minute, that's okay.
I
For the
love
long
it.
ride.
He goes to the office every day, which is good. Now, I mean, again, so as Pat said, you do have to do an RFQ. I have plenty of them that everyone uses. And the main, it's been the same one that Drummond Woodson approved many years ago, so use the same one. It's pretty vanilla. It's yours to use and put out there. That's pretty much it. There is no cost associated with the upfront audit, and I can say probably most companies will say the same exact thing. How these companies get paid is they get a percentage of the project they do. And then you identify that in the beginning. You know, it's like EMC, we charge 15% on our projects. That's what we charge, right? And the cost associated with the audit, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Anyone tells you they're doing a free audit, they're lying, right?
Right.
You're building the cost associated with the audit into the project. You identify your engineering fees in the project.
Yeah.
Right, but you're not just gonna say it's 1 million square foot of facilities that you're looking at, so it's $1 per square foot, and you're gonna spend $1 million in engineering. You know ahead of time, okay, what are we talking here for engineering? You kind of give a ballpark so that there's no surprises at the end. This should be crystal clear, zero ambiguity with what you're getting at the end. There's nothing worse than getting a project that all this great information, but you paid $1 million to do it. I mean, that would be a complete nightmare. So a lot of those costs, I can't speak for everyone, but they should be identified up front, so there's no surprises.
Tom, the report that you shared with the committee, is that something that you could send to me that I could share amongst?
Sure.
It's really hard to see,
I get it,
and
yeah.
I'm not sure if anyone wants to take a better look at things. I won't release it publicly. I know it's on another school district, but at least for people to look at.
Yeah, I mean, 99% of our projects are schools, so they're all public information, right? So yeah, absolutely, I can send it to you. I
Thank
think
you
I
so
may send it
much.
to you.
Yeah, I do have a copy of it.
Yeah.
I do have, I mean, has some great information. It's very detailed.
Yeah,
So the report is, looking through it would be extremely beneficial to the school.
I think that's a
district.
great idea.
Extremely.
One thing is it sounds to me like you could really use this report as some kind of a living document going forward for all kinds of stuff. So it's,
yeah, use the spreadsheet to your liking. I mean,
Yeah.
there's things in here that may have nothing to do with the ESCO that you partner with, right?
Right.
But you have a cash flow tool that allows you to figure out how can we pay for this? It's a very creative mechanism in terms of
Yeah.
making $20,000 to a district of this size a year versus $3 million, right? They looked at entirely different.
Mhm.
Can we get $20,000 in our annual budget to pay for this? Yeah, that's a heck of a lot more palatable than having to come up with $3 million. That's really what we're talking about. There's only two ways to do projects. You either bond it and raise your budget, or you do it this way. That's truthfully the only way. This is the only legal way to design, build a project. What I mean by that is you can pick the contractors you want to bid on your projects. It doesn't have to go out to the paper to get lowest bid, because lowest bid is a thing of the past, and really no one does it anymore. So you control that narrative. The contractors that you love, that are there for you when you need them to be at 4 in the morning, when you know, they bid on your projects because that's who you want to be here.
So I'm just gonna follow up. So typically when the school district does a project of this size, they would be required to go out to the voters for voter approval. There is a carve out in statute for performance contracts that have energy efficiency. So that's what we were talking about. So with a project of this kind, we would not be required to go out for voter approval, which is why it's so closely overseen by the legal team, Drummond Whitson, because it has to follow statute. So that is why it's very attractive. It allows school districts to do work that they need to do to see savings and to upgrade their facilities using this funding mechanism. So there's a lot of great pluses to it.
Okay,
Okay, I have that document as well. So I am going to, if I can find it again, right here.
Will you send it to me and I'll drop it in the
I have it
Google Docs?
copied. I copied you.
Perfect, thank you.
Gabe, you said you have it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I just sent it to everyone. So, okay. Tom, thank you
Yes.
very much.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate your time. Appreciate you driving up here. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I
Learn
hope so.
something.
To us it is.
It is.
Yeah, I think so.
So we'll talk a little bit more about RFQs after Gabe, and so maybe we can kind of fold this conversation into that.
Drive safely.
Drive safely. Thank you, Tom.
All right, good
Bye.
night.
You and Scout have a good night.
Alrighty.
I know.
I mean, maybe my tires are just bad. It's entirely possible.
Very cool. Gabe?
So me, okay, so now that we heard Tom and his spiel and so yeah, basically everything that Tom has on his report is kind of the, you know, not for this school, but for that school that it was on. Basically, the capital improvement plan, that's what it is, basically. And we've always just done it in-house and kind of go school by school and look at all the things that are in need of repair. We try to hit on as many of them as possible. This year, well, I'll go back, last year we had cut a lot out of here, so there was only about 268,000 that was left in there. So as you can see in this year's starting point, we're at 846,000, which I understand that that's a starting point. We will go over it. I'll be very honest, we can't keep cutting stuff out of the capital improvement because things are in dire need of being fixed. And I know we're looking at, you know, potential consolidation for the elementary schools, but those schools are, except for one of them, they're all over 30 years old now. Those elementary schools, and Helen Thompson's getting to be 30 years old. Everything is aging out. So it's becoming more and more of a struggle. A lot of things have been pushed year after year, so I tried to keep it down as well as possible, but there are things that need to be replaced. One of them, which again was touched on, exterior doors. They're 30 years old. We've already replaced a couple here and there, but I need to replace doors. 30,000 will get me 3 door replacements. So that's 3 doors. We're looking at about $10,000 per door. Unfortunately, it's not just the door slab, but it's the frames. The bottoms are rusted out. That's why the whole thing needs to be done. If you've ever been to LER, they have door glass that's above them. All of that's together as one. Just can't kind of patch them in. So they're expensive. The commercial doors, and this price is using some of the existing hardware. So the crash bars would probably be the same crash bars that are there, as long as they're in good condition to try to keep the cost down. But yeah, that's 3 doors to replace, super expensive. We had pulled out last year, some playground renovation on the pre-K side of the school. We put that money back in to see if we can redo it this year. We did move some fencing that was over there, but this is to take up some pavement, give them some more grassed area, and to look at potentially a small piece of playground equipment if there's money, or at least repairs to the existing. The existing playground that's there is original from 30 years ago. It's pretty old, needs definitely some updating. So, gym door key fobs. Right now, we just have a lockbox with a key in it for facility use. There's, at all our schools, there's a lot, especially basketball time of year. All our elementary schools, high school, middle school, they're all being used for basketball. High school, middle school, they already have the fob system. So we give a key fob, people can get in, access in and out for facilities. Elementary schools do not, so there's a potential of keys being lost, given to somebody else. So just to try to get correct access to the buildings on a fob system that we can turn off and on as needed. That's something we really would like to do. Carpets, we had pulled carpets out last year, I'd like to put them back in, $10,000. We'll probably do 2 classrooms for carpets. So at least just to get started on some classrooms, carpets, hard floors, to redo them. Again, carpets, they're 30 years old. Most people don't
Some of
have
them are in
carpets in
bad
their houses for 30 years, so there are some that are extremely bad, extremely bad.
Just think about what's under it, even if it's glued down.
Well, let's not. So they're 30 years of carpet.
Yeah.
They get cleaned, you know, we do deep cleaning of them every vacation break over the summer. But they're getting so thin, there's not much left to them. So you'll hear it at the other schools too. Carpet's one thing we really need to do. With the recent power outage and issues we've been having with storms, emergency lights. I had originally thought LER was on the list for this year. It was not. So I wanted to make sure it's in for next year at least. If potentially we can get to it this year with some leftover funds at the end of the year, reallocated, we can probably do them and we can scratch them off. That's something we'll look at. Heating valves are in there this year too. All the valves and actuators in the school are, again, 30 years old. They are all failing. A lot of them are leaking, so we're trying to replace them as we can. That's Richards, Riverview. Had to choose one of the schools to look at gym floor replacement. Both LER and Riverview had the same type vinyl gym floor. It's delaminating in multiple spots, pulling apart. Both of them have their trip hazards and spots. So Riverview looks the worst right now. So kind of looking at gym floor replacement for Riverview, that's in there. Again, key fob entry, do the same thing. The other piece at Riverview, the school zone lights, the flashing 15-mile-an-hour lights down there. They do have lights on the poles. They have not been operating for quite a few years now. Oddly enough, when we had the power outage and they put power back on the other day, they must have fixed something in a box. The lights all of a sudden started flashing, but there's no controller that works in it. We opened the box, there's nothing, the controller's dead, but somehow there was power to the lights. So still, the units need to be replaced. They're original. They are completely inside the boxes. The boxes are originally watertight. They're not now. They've leaked, big issues. They're not cheap. I'm hoping we can replace them with some solar units for this price. So 2 units solar mounted on the poles, maybe save a little bit of money in the long run for the cost of running the lights. Carpet replacements also there. And then again, the valve replacement's the same. Here, we have a newer piece of playground equipment there, but the swings are the original 30-year-old swings. This year, we've had some broken seats, broken chains. We actually had a child, because it broke, they fell to the ground, had to see the nurse. So those sort of things, it's just a safety piece. Really need to look at a new set of swings over at the school for sure. Pittston, again, door entry for the gym. same piece. Carpets for the classrooms, emergency lights over there also. Something we need to look at, potentially if we have some reallocated money and some funds at the end of the year, we could look at doing the emergency lights. There, I know this was at our meeting the other
We didn't
day.
talk about this
We
the
didn't
other
talk
day.
about a mower, but we need a mower. I honestly, that school, the mowing deck to the tractor that's there is terrible.
So Terry, do you have a spare mower?
No.
She has snow blowers, wrong time of year. We mow at that school because of the way the grounds are. There's a huge field area and it's a large area to mow out back. And not that I would put the new mower here, but we would reallocate one of our mowers, probably the secondary one we have at the high school. That's our backup, to move there and give the high school one, which has a lot more mowing, the newer unit. And still keep the tractor at Pittston, but he would just have a mower for the summertime mowing. Because that's the problem, the tractors at the schools, they have a mowing deck on them, but they're really not meant for mowing what they mow. They're a subcompact tractor, not really a lawnmower. And they've been used as a lawnmower, and so they're destroying the mowing decks. The amount of money we put into the parts for the mowing deck every year, it's a lot of money.
I'm not opposed to the mower, but it really doesn't belong in the capital improvement list because that has to do with the operation of the building itself. So I think we should move it at least off the capital improvement.
And that's absolutely fine, wherever, I just wanted,
have no
I just
problem with
wanted
the
to
mower.
capture a cost of a
Yeah.
piece of equipment. And so that's why I put it in
So
there.
where should he go?
Well, this is not his entire budget. This is just the capital piece of his budget. There are actually a few other things in here that really aren't capital.
If we get a
that- that's
remote
in
one,
here.
could we put it in Terry's budget?
Sure, we could put it in Terry's budget.
So it's equipment, it
Yeah,
would go
just
in
equipment.
different, gotcha.
So I just wanted to
different line,
capture
yeah.
that we need something, so I put it in there. That's fine. Helen Thompson. We thought we were done all of the siding. There is one more section. On, I know, a side that not many people venture to, but on the side of the kitchen entrance and above the kitchen entrance with the boiler room, the siding is falling off the last section of the building. So we need to do one more piece with metal siding over there on that side.
He's fibbing to us saying.
No,
that
this
it's done.
is the last piece. I promise it's the last piece.
Is the entryway ceiling secure?
Yes, that's section, that's
Good,
Very
good, good.
But we do need to do the water treatment tanks, which is something that does come up every 2 to 3 years. We put the new system over there for the PFAS. So this would, hopefully, we wouldn't have to replace any of those tanks, but we have the arsenic tanks also that are due, 2 of them are due next year to be replaced. So they're about $2,500 a piece for the tanks. Yeah, the arsenic tanks. To pull them out, put 2 new tanks, and we have 4 tanks for the arsenic. Yep, so about $5,000 to do the arsenic swap out. Yep.
I'll talk to you later.
Exterior doors.
Need a tank?
I need a tank and I was quoted a lot more than $2,500.
Exterior, I can give you the name of the company. So again, exterior doors, this is again about 3 doors for exterior doors to replace over there. And that's pretty much it. The other stuff is just some standard pieces that were in there. Cooling tower treatment, stuff like that. Middle school, exterior doors. I sound like a broken record, but we need to start on some there again, about 3 doors. Interior doorknob repairs, we did a bunch this year. So we need to do some more. This is more, we focused on the classrooms last year, this year, in this budget season. We were able to get 13 of them done. And so we're pretty good with the classrooms, but these are some office spaces that they're having issues with, the doorknobs, door locks, things like that. So we should be able to clean up
And clean up, how many, 5?
about 5.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I wanna be really clear.
Yeah, it's
they're
not
like
clean up
$1,000
everything,
a
but this
pop.
is 5.
Okay.
They're about $1,000 by the time you buy the unit, rekey it, install it, it's close to $1,000.
We had this conversation
Last year.
last year, and we
It's,
all
it's
guessed.
a little different. It's not a residential knob where you would go to Home Depot and buy a knob for $30 or something like that. It's not, they're commercial grade. They have to be specific functions, so they have to be able to be rekeyed and mastered for that. And they have to match the keys cylinders that we have on set, so. These are actually less expensive than Allen tops.
So wait, does that mean that you take them and Bert's like moves around the things inside so that they match the keys?
Everything. Yeah, the cylinders, everything have to be keyed, so they match everything, and there's,
Never thought of that.
the schools have multiple zones. Just the middle school, has to be 25 different key zones, in just that one building alone.
The things you don't think about.
Yeah, there's a lot of different keys.
Interesting.
That's why when I walk around, I jingle, and I actually have masters to just the schools, so.
We thought it was because you were marrying Carrie and Phyllis.
Well, that too, there's the key. Yeah, Pat has her.
Oh, bye.
Has hers.
Oh, wow. You do have a lot of keys. I've never, I
Lots of
sit here
keys.
all the time and I never pay attention to them.
None of them are my personal ones. These are all work related.
How do you keep them straight?
Well, this one says WG,
I color coded mine.
So,
I have color coded.
so you
rings.
never are standing outside using,
right? This is South Gardner. AA is the high school, A is the high school, so things like that.
interesting.
Yeah, some of the custodians have cut little notches, so they can just feel with their finger. So like one notch is the,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
high school master, the second notch is the interior doors at the high school or some, so they kind of all have their little things, so that, but they don't have to look, they just have to feel, and they know, it's kind of like the braille on
I like the
document.
color coding idea.
Yeah, so I've color coded on mine, so that's the way I have, so
Interesting.
each school has their color.
I
Yep.
love that.
Emergency lights again, you kind of see a pattern with all the schools, we're trying to hit some of the, kind of the same things in one year to get them done. We do have some miscellaneous floor, I just put it in there, floor repairs. We have some sections of the floor that are peeling up, delaminated, some of it's due to old water leaks that we may have had years ago that the tiles are finally popping up and they're loose. So it's in like 4 different spots, so I just kind of grouped it together. The rear basketball hoops, I don't know if you've ever picked up children over there out back of the gym, there's a couple basketball hoops, they're leaning over, there's concrete showing around them. To get them reset, replaced, I'm trying to kind of move them back a little bit, I'm gonna try to. So they're redone over there, so that way they can be a little more usable again. Roofing PM is in there, library furniture, we took out of last year's, just put it back into this year's library furniture. The high school, first thing is a big ticket item. We spoke about it a little bit, the revolving renovation funds. The catwalk was a project that we had put into that last year and it was kicked back. It was not approved by the state. They did approve the asbestos abatement and the flooring, so we did that project. If anybody's walked across the catwalk at any point in time, whether it's the middle of winter or when it's raining, especially, it's pretty much, sometimes I'm not sure if it's even a good idea to have it. It's just as wet inside the catwalk as it is outside at times. So I put it in there, just that basically is the cost that we had received from the contractor to do the catwalk. I would love to do it. Obviously, students every day back and forth. So it's a big eyesore. I know it's a big ticket, so I put it in there.
Does it ever get slippery in there?
Yes, it freezes. When it rains, it gets slippery, it freezes.
Well, that's not good.
We had with the storm that we had, of course, it leaks every time. The wind, they're single pane windows, they've never been changed out. They're probably original from when it was built in the 60s. The water just blows right in. So we've over the years, there's been a multitude of different Floor finishes we put down, to try to make it non-skid, which has peeled up over the years just because it's wet all the time. It's,
Is this number for something similar, or is it gonna be a different
it
design?
would just be, a framed up, structure. It wouldn't be all the glass like it is. I think it would have, it'd be a pitched roof, not a flat roof, so we wouldn't have to worry about the rubber membrane up there leaking through. And we would do windows, but I would just do them higher. Everything gets broken, so we try to make it so it's, built stronger. The base is fine, the concrete is fine, but we would redo a floor, whether we did a, board floor, something that can withhold, the maintenance through there. We didn't plan on, when we looked at it, we talked about heating it, we just probably put like one heat pump in there. It would be insulated, so one heat pump, it's really not a lot of square footage, but just the way the unit is, we can stick it on the end and it would blow down through there. Yeah, and there's no plumbing, there's nothing in there, all the electrical and communication lines run underneath it, so there's nothing in that would have to be looking at. Yeah, I know,
And
it's a big
moving
ticket.
sidewalks side by side, one that goes this way, goes quick in the other way.
So we discussed the
I know, so-
possibility of resubmitting,
Yeah,
you
we
know,
did,
another revolving fund.
and that is something,
I don't know whether it would be
that's,
approved.
right, exactly, whether we would resubmit. We do have all the documents for that one,
Yeah,
so it wouldn't be much to resubmit that one to do it. Whether
yeah,
it would be approved or kicked back, we don't know, but I wanted to at least put something in there. It's
yeah, we
there.
also talked about some of these other emergency items. They're small, but such as the emergency lighting. It's small, but if it adds up every single building, if we could put in for $50,000, if we could get 70% of that back, it would certainly help. So we're talking about that. I don't even know when they open again, do you?
I don't, I'll have to look up the date. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The piece that you have to put, so you have, an application is per school,
For school.
per item, so we'd have to do an application for each one of those
Emergency light projects.
pieces, so.
So if
yeah,
they're only
there's a lot.
$5,000 a piece, that doesn't make a lot of
Right,
sense.
right. So that's the
Usually-
hard piece.
sorry, Usually applications are due in September and
Right.
October, so it's in the fall.
Oh, so did we miss it?
Mhm.
We did?
Yep, they talked about it when I was at the school law conference.
See, when we did this last one, it was in April. When we did all the submittals.
Hmm.
With the last one,
Yeah.
so, but yeah, cause we had until. It was like the 30th of May or 31st of May, it was in the spring when we did the last group, so,
I
but
remember
I'll take a
Bill
peek.
Stockmeyer asking if everyone had submitted their revolving renovation applications.
So, next thing on the list, sea wind panels. So we've been doing a small batch each year. I put in a little bit more money just to get a bigger push on it. Really noticing, doing the walkarounds with some inspectors after this last storm. There are even more panels on the side of Sea Wing towards the field hockey field that are rusted through. So we need to do some more replacement of those panels.
So as a reminder, that's what I was just checking on Saturday, February 10th. We're supposed to tour the schools. Does everyone still have that on their calendar? And so I think places like that, Gabe.
Yeah, we can,
That you
absolutely.
can show them some of this and we'll make sure we take a walk down the catwalk. So people
Sure.
get that experience if they haven't had it already.
Yeah.
So.
And where are mining hats?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
that would be
Yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah. No, that's a good idea,
Okay.
sure. Yeah, so those are the things we can definitely
Right.
look at.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. The next item on the list, fencing replacement. We had taken it out of the budget last year and I just put it back in. It's for fencing around the Hope Field. Again, that fencing's originally from the mid-70s. It's pretty bad. It'd be nice to get that fencing replaced and also do new fencing where the main entrance gate is and the ticket booth. to redo that fence. Instead of the 8 foot tall fence that's there, we'd do a lower black fence, so it would match. If anybody has gone down where the new gate is, where you drive down in towards the Sports Boosters building, there's a lower 4 foot black chain link fence there with a gate. It would be that sort of fencing right there. Yep, so we just do a black fence instead. The other thing, walking down again to the new entrance of the field, there are no lights down the new access road to where the main ticket booth is. So in when there are night games, it's pretty dark walking down there for the game and back. So looking at doing some lighting, pretty much just put a placeholder in there. We talked about doing like 4 different poles that are there, depending on what we spec for devices, how much it's gonna cost, but it'll be somewhere around 15,000 just to do the lighting to get down to the field over there. And they would be along with our other lights that we have down on the grounds, they're dusted on. So they'd be in conjunction and similar to those ones, and they would be all LED lighting for those. This is another thing we just talked about the other day, which if we're looking at the Hope Field to talk about renovation of bathrooms. I spoke to a contractor, we just put a placeholder in there of 60,000 just to get a start. I meet with the contractor Thursday. To really go over what we would be looking at doing. And he's bringing plumber with him. So that way we can kind of get an idea of what the bathrooms would look like if we were to renovate the bathrooms, what we could do.
So part of that conversation, how that surfaced, was specific to D that we're going to get to.
Yep.
The community funding project, right? And if we are trying to pull together an application for those available funds around paving, we talked about the track. And I was like, our bathroom facilities down there, they're for the community. We don't even use them for the most part, not during the school day unless, you know, a student is out there for PE or practice maybe, but they're there primarily for our public. So that may be an area that we could get funded. And if you have been down in recent years and gone into those bathrooms,
They're from the 70s.
you will understand why they need to be
Yeah.
redone. Yeah, they're pretty bad.
So if if we look at redoing the bathrooms, you know, we would make sure we go through them and upgrade plumbing, the plumbing in there. Not that anybody's been in there, but there's 2 walls with a big void in between, and you have to crawl in there every year, because I get in there and we unhook all the water for the winter time, and it's quite a process. So definitely if we could redo something to make that easier for my staff, that would be lovely. That's for sure. So definitely it's an old building in need of some definite TLC and upgrades for sure. Yep. So I just put a placeholder in there. Will not know solid numbers until we get a little bit further down the road. All right, where was I? Stairs. We need to start replacing some of our rubber stair treads in the tech wing. That was a renovation back in the 90s. And some of the treads, they get a heavy usage because they're already starting to wear through. So you figure that project was, I think, what, 95?
I wasn't here, I just know it was
wasn't
in
either,
the
but
90s.
All I know is we're almost at 30 years, so
I don't remember.
30 years is kind of the magic number.
And I think it was the early
I think it
to
was
mid-90s, yeah.
So we're, I'm sure, pushing the 30 years. So need to start doing some of the stairs. So we threw a budget number in there that can at least get a set with a landing kind of taken care of. The next big piece, which we did a kind of a swap for the roof sections from this year's budget. So the $90,000 went into this year's that we're doing. And so I put back the 115 that we were originally gonna have. So that got thrown back in there for the 15. The rest of it on the list is just some standard cooling tower stuff.
You still get the same amount done for 115?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Oh, yeah. No, we're good. Yep, already spoke to Genie Roofing, so we're good on that one, so,
just checking.
yep, no, we're good.
And that's, yeah.
Superintendent's office, that's pretty much nil, is barely anything there, and the same with the transportation office, we're not doing anything, so.
Except for the generator that Andrea's going to ask for this office to manage.
And Andrea's gonna find money for that, rainy day,
Yeah, sure.
it's gonna rain tomorrow, so.
Behind my door.
The rainy day power outage fund.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
the one.
that's,
Yeah.
I guess, moving forward in the future, we're probably gonna have to put together, so. Yeah, so, I mean, generators, that's
The reason
another,
why us and not a school is we don't have the ability to just pick up and move our servers. So to make sure that we're able to issue a payroll. I mean, this time, it really brought home the challenge with that. And yeah, it was pretty close where we were not going to be able to issue payroll. And it was the week of Christmas.
I mean, I was looking at having the bank pass through an old payroll and having to make all those check corrections because it was the last payroll of the year, which would have taken hours and hours of somebody's time. I mean, I think people forget how big of an employer we are. I issued W-2s and there was 545 W-2s. We are a major employer in this community.
So Andrea, what's the plan if you have power here, but there's no internet?
Terry, you and I have talked about this several times.
Right.
So all it requires is for somebody here to have a hotspot, which several of us do. So I would take my laptop and I would connect my laptop to my hotspot or hotspots that we can purchase through the district. I would connect through the bank's website and I would upload the payroll file that's generated by our accounting software through my laptop into the bank's website. And that's all of the internet that I would require. All of our other ADS and Pro Fund services run directly off the server in the server room. So I'm not as worried about internet. We would need internet to be able to access Frontline, which is where all of our timesheets are. But besides those two, other than that, we wouldn't really need internet. We wouldn't have email. And there are a lot of other things that we wouldn't
So we
have
have-
access to.
Having a generator here is far less expensive than it would be at one of the schools we were talking about. You know, I don't know what it would cost here. I don't know if it'd be similar to a home, you know, given that we don't have a lot here.
right, this is all single phase power.
Right, but if we were to look at one for like Helen Thompson, which is the only school that doesn't have town sewer, town water, yeah, that's $100,000 probably was what you were expecting. Something, a
That's
big
upward, I'm sure.
diesel.
It would be a large
Yeah.
diesel generator
Yeah.
plant. Out there, it's 3-phase. The heat pumps, everything runs off heat pumps.
Yeah.
I mean, even here, we can pick and choose what we want it to run. It wouldn't run everything, it would need to run everything. It's similar to what we do at the bus office.
Right.
We have the generator there to run the fuel pumps and to run the minimal heat that we have, and that's what we run.
Terry, what would we need to run internet here?
Well,
It's-
the server racks would all have to be powered because that's where all the switches and the internet comes in. The routers are all in there, so we would have to have that. Like the last time, we had wires down all around the soup's office. So if that was the case, the hotspot would be the way to go.
Yeah, that's my.
Yeah, cause a lot of times the phone lines are down. If there's no power here, it's taking either consolidated or Spectrum lines down with it, so you wouldn't have access to it.
The time it takes to upload that file is probably 10 minutes. It wouldn't be we wouldn't need it extended.
Right.
So, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, in the district, this is the easier
Mhm.
building to do. It's more, it's an office, but it's more set up like a home. The systems are similar to a home, it'd be easier.
And I think our staff would be reassured knowing that we would be able to generate payroll. I mean, we had a plan. I mean, it wasn't a great plan, but at least people would have been.
If there's power here, you just have to come to work. And no choice, right?
Gabe,
Office is open.
He's right.
this belief that some of us are off,
That's not
we
the
all
plan.
worked.
I know.
Or I can
Oh,
only, I
believe
guess
me.
I'll speak for myself, we
During the
put in a
days-
lot of hours.
During the days, we had no power.
If there's power here, we can come here,
Yeah,
bring our laptops and charge our
I guess maybe
phones,
that's what I meant, maybe. This could be the
do my Zoom.
Well,
the community,
it's like,
community
I'm not
charging
saying
stations.
that we're gonna open it up to everybody because we have work to do upstairs, but
but it could be a bit of a
yeah.
Well, it's,
small warming station for if there were other offices that needed something like the, city hall or something, yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, are we?
Can I just add one more thing? Gabe mentioned that we cut a lot of, out of his budget last year. Typically, a capital improvement budget runs about 320,000. That's not my recommendation. I'm just letting you know that when you look at going above that, the implications to the budget so that you're aware. And it all depends how difficult a budget year.
Yeah, but I think, Gabe also at the beginning of this was mentioning prices have gone up, construction, labor. And I don't know that we're going to be able to stay within that range, given some of the increasing needs of our facilities, if we're
Right.
going to really maintain them. I know the number that we saw, yeah, that's a real spike, and that's not what I envision happening, but sticking around 300, I don't know if
Well,
that's realistic.
that 3 to 350, that was the same number that it was at when I started here 12 years ago.
Yeah, it's just, it needs
So-
to increase.
So I
And
mean,
I-
and I understand, I totally understand. I mean, I know the number that's on there is a big number. But it's a starting point and we
Yeah.
have to start somewhere. Everything
And
is expensive.
I don't
Oh,
disagree.
yeah.
I just, our salary costs are going up,
Yep.
because of contracts. Last year, our health insurance was at 0. I don't imagine that will be that way again.
Yep.
The state family medical leave law that we're looking at is going to add about $185,000 to our budget.
Jeez.
So there's a lot of things that are going to, and there are also additional positions that we were going to be losing as part of the Easter grants that I know that people will want to keep. So there's gonna be a lot of demands.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's why I think Tom's report and what he can offer us is, it's beneficial. We need to do some of these projects. I understand, new construction is, if we even get to that point, is quite a ways out. We can't just stop maintaining and doing work on our buildings.
So can we use that as a lead in to number 3,
Absolutely.
Becky?
Yep, sure can.
So update on RFQ. I know it has taken us longer to get an RFQ than what we had anticipated.
Mhm.
And we talked about this in the fall, and it's like, oh, why isn't it done yet? We received a draft from the DOE. We spent some time analyzing it, and we felt like this just doesn't make sense to us. I don't know if it's the right RFQ, it doesn't work for us for what we want, because what we're looking to do is to get qualifications for people who might be interested in helping us put together an application that we could potentially use down the road if it's ever approved to do a consolidated school or one of the other schools. But the information that was sent to us was really around new construction and it just didn't apply, so we struggled. So we worked on it. Gabe tried to find another one. This Tom Seekins idea came in and we met with Tom. And then we scheduled another meeting with the Department of Education that was canceled due to a storm. So we rescheduled and we actually finally connected with them on Friday. And they're supposed to send us an updated RFQ now that they've really listened and are really clear on what it is that we're looking for. I haven't received a draft of that yet, so hopefully we'll receive it soon. But I guess based on what I've heard you guys say, that you are interested in moving forward with new construction applications for all of our schools, just to get us on the books, right? And after listening to Tom, I actually would propose that we kind of look at doing 2 RFQs. Do an RFQ to help us pursue some type of contract with a company similar to Tom's and kind of do that assessment. In addition to an RFQ that would target like an architectural engineering firm. That is going to cost money, right? Versus, if we do something around energy or an audit of our facilities, as he said, generally, there's no no upfront cost, it's built into the contract. That will not be the case with the other. The other may be, like an $80,000, $100,000 cost. So we'll have to wait and do our assessment of the RFQs, which are just their qualifications, and then determine how to proceed. We do not have an extra $80,000, $100,000 just sitting around. So we'll have to kind of figure that out. But that would be my recommendation, that I would like to kind of jump on that now that we do have a sample, right, that Tom shared with us that we can use for that RFQ. And I am expecting Valerie from the Department of Education to send us a draft for the other one, hopefully sooner than later. What do you guys think? Does that make sense?
I think so.
I think so, yeah.
So during the annual school finance conference, they talked about school construction because the construction applications are going to open. We are not required to go out for an RFQ for what Pat is talking about. If we didn't go out for an RFQ, it might allow us to test drive an architectural firm. And if that worked well, then we could do an RFQ later. Or if it didn't work well, we could do an RFQ to work with somebody else. But the way that it was spun in the finance meeting is this might be an opportunity to test drive somebody to see if they're a good fit without any long-term commitments. So we certainly could do an RFQ, but Bill mentioned that it would not be required. We would, however, need an RFQ with a building project once we were approved. So
since we are not in the business, right, and we haven't dealt with any architectural firms in years.
Yeah.
Personally, I like the idea of doing an RFQ because I don't know who's interested. I don't know what schools they've constructed, and that would provide us all of that type of information so we could do our research, and then you could still test out an architectural firm. You're not stuck with them if you move forward into construction.
Right.
You can always at any time switch gears and go with a different company.
it's just the RFQ process is such a lengthy process because you have to interview all of your applicants.
Yeah.
So it's not a bid process, it's an application process where you have a conversation and it's more of an interview than it is a bid for services. So just thought out there trying to save us,
Right.
not knowing if
Time.
we want to save some time and work.
Yeah, but this is a big deal, and I haven't worked with an architectural firm now for 14 years. So it might be nice to really find out what the companies have been doing, who's still out there. And really get some reference checks from colleagues around the state.
Are there new architectural firms?
I have no idea.
It's interesting because I would think those would be great bait for fall conference. Why aren't?
I just don't know what's out there is all I'm saying, you know, so.
No, but there aren't any that are vendors that come to our.
I don't know. What do you all think? Yay, nay? How do I
Yes,
proceed?
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm good with that.
For both?
I am, yeah.
Great, then
Yep,
let's
sounds
work on that. All right, community funding projects, project estimate,
I don't have project estimates.
Yeah.
so.
and they're coming, you have been in contact with,
I've been in contact with people, it just, I do not have the final numbers.
okay, but they're coming next week is what they
I should
promised
be able
you?
to get them next week.
Okay, so once those come in,
Well, yeah, once they come in, I'll share them immediately. So,
we'll share them, however, it may be a little bit before you have a meeting again, so the next step for us is once we receive them, I'll reach back out probably to the contact, the person that we met with before, to get some information, but I think the next piece on our end is we have to receive letters of support from community, whether it would be from the town, from organizations that use our facilities. And so we'll pull some of that together kind of as a next step, but I need to be able to communicate what the cost is gonna be. And I also wondered, Gabe, you and I talked about this, whether it was reasonable to try to roll in the elementary school gym floors because of their usage. So maybe we could do that as well, keeping in mind that what he told us is that whatever the total bill, we may be expected to contribute 10 to 20%. So we can't have it be so large, right, that we're not able to actually contribute that 10 or 20%. So just keeping that all in
Yep.
mind, so. All right, that's the update there.
Family medical leave.
So we've talked about that before, right, at the board meeting. I went through all of the legal, the new laws and the
Mhm.
implications, but
This is not that. So Pat talked about what the implications would be to staff. I'm going to talk about what our cost is going to be. So, and when we're going to have to be required to start sending premiums to the state. So effective January 2025, which is actually our next budget, we are going to be required to submit 1% of all of our wages to the state for this new paid family medical leave law. MSMA asked for school districts to provide a estimate of what our costs would be. Since I don't know what our costs are for our salaries this year, I based our cost on last year's. So the $185,000 that I talked about is last year's salaries cost. We've talked amongst ourselves that our salary scales continue to increase because we need to remain competitive. So it's going to be more than the 185,000. So there's part of the law that says that employees with 15 employers with 15 or more employees may deduct up to 50% of the premium from employees. It says may. So I'm in the process of starting to put together our budget for next year. I need guidance from the board whether or not we are going to pick up the entire 1% ourselves, or whether we are going to require our employees to pick up 50% of the premium as allowed in the new law.
So, two things. One, the 185, is that for a full year or is that for the 6 months?
That is a full, they wanted to know what our cost would be for a year, so I estimated 1% on last year's wages.
Okay, so when you build the budget, you only build in half of that at the
First
1%, right?
Half,
It's not a full year, it's a
Right.
half year.
But I'm
Okay.
also asking whether it's 1% for half a year
Right.
or 0.5% for half a year. I just need some
So
guidance.
that is not a conversation we can have here right now. That would be a conversation that has to start with the negotiations committee.
I understand.
To discuss that, and then that, of course, would have to go back to the full board to consider.
I need to start budgeting, however, and I need guidance. It's easier to cut than
So
it is.
start with 1%. I would say start with 1%, do what that maximum is, and then you will have guidance in time. How's that?
That
Okay.
works. I just didn't want to take it upon myself to make the decision without consulting with the finance committee.
Yeah, that would be the guidance for now.
May I
And
ask
we're
a
gonna talk
question?
about that in another
We'll need to,
forum.
Do we know what other districts are doing?
1%.
We don't know yet.
I think right now, a lot of
Nobody
districts
knows.
that I am aware of, they're starting with the 1%.
Go big or go home. And
So
then we
there's-
can-
Just
and then we
because it's
can-
early, and there's a
Absolutely, we
lot
can
that
back
still
off.
needs to be
It's hard to
figured
add.
out.
It's all gonna be negotiated through collective bargaining at some point, so.
So
It's easier to
I'm
come
part
back
of
off than-
the- Sorry,
Okay.
back.
No.
So I'm part of the business managers, and they've been talking amongst themselves on the business manager listserv. And the people that I am hearing from, there's some of both. So there are people who are starting out at 50%, and there are districts who are going to budget the entire 1%. So I'm just letting you know what I'm reading.
Okay. This will be fun.
Yeah. It's always is.
Okay, budget timeline.
So the next conversation is regarding the budget timeline and the new law that allows additional time between the budget meeting and the referendum. So I have provided to you a very color-coded document with 4 scenarios.
These are all scenarios.
The first scenario, so just so that to start out, the first scenario is if this, when the state has a referendum, it's always the second Tuesday of the month. So for this year, the referendum will be scheduled, the state referendum will be June 11th. And we always try to piggyback on the state referendum, because if we hold our own referendum, the district has to pick up the cost. So it has always made sense to piggyback with the state. The timeline that you see here, there are a lot of things that we have to, that go into it, including there are a lot of deadlines that we have to adhere to in order to produce our warrants and produce our annual budget newsletter. Among them are the putting together of reports for the person who does the budget newsletter. That person who does the budget newsletter is a contractor who's not employed by the district. It then needs to go to the printer, and then it needs to go to the post office in order to get that budget newsletter in the hands of taxpayers before the annual budget meeting. There are other things that I want to show you, including when huge decisions are made, such as our annual health insurance, when that's typically decided. So that is typically not decided until the first week of April. In some of these scenarios, primarily 3 and 4 would require us to push having our budget set before those increases are announced. You would have to set your budget. We would need to do warrants and begin the process in order to accommodate the annual budget meeting being pushed back. So the first is 1 week before, the second scenario is 2 weeks before, the third week is 3 weeks before the referendum. And the fourth scenario is actually a month before, so our budget meeting would be a month before. Other things to take into consideration, if we move our annual budget meeting from the date that we have typically used, Greg M has told me that he may not be available he most likely would not be available to moderate our meeting. And most of the Drummond Woodsum attorneys are also moderating other meetings. And I want to say that having a legal moderator at our annual budget meeting, I would hate for something to happen that would invalidate our budget meeting, so that we would have to start the process over. So there's a certain security that I have having legal counsel at that meeting to make sure that the meeting is appropriate and it is run correctly. I have given you all of the different color combinations and told you when things are going to be done. So I don't anticipate being able to present the budget any sooner than, or having the budget done any sooner than February 26th. That gives, in all of the scenarios, the aqua-colored is time for the finance committee and the board to deliberate. You see the anthem rate. That is, like I said, typically the first week of April. Purple, the dark purple that you see in April is the date by which you would need to have the budget set. And as you can see in scenario 3 or 4, that purple is even before the anthem premiums are released. I know there's a lot of information. My recommendation would either be to leave the scenario as is, or to look at scenario 2, backing it up another week, knowing that we may not have legal counsel to moderate our meeting.
And how soon can you secure legal counsel? I like number 2. And the reason I like number 2 is because of the absentee ballots accepted. It just gives our town offices a little more wiggle room, right? Between May 28th and the 11th versus June 4th to the 11th.
So school budget ballots cannot legally be accepted until after the day after our budget meeting. Any school budget ballots that are received before that point have to be discarded by the city clerk. So it does allow an extra day or an extra week of absentee ballots. I've spoken to Greg. Greg said that if we change it, that he doubts that he or anyone would be able to moderate. I can ask him again, but I had a conversation with him as I was preparing this.
Yeah.
And they are very tightly booked moderating budget meetings.
If you could double check specifically for the 28th, he brought another person with him
Oh, yes,
last
he did.
year, training her to be a moderator. And just to find out if indeed there is anyone else who would be available. I mean, I agree with you. I think I really like having Drummond Woodsum there.
Mhm.
I really do. And they would be my preference to have as a moderator. I just really like the idea of giving community members the 2 weeks to submit their absentee ballots. I think it's really tight when they only just have ultimately 1, 2, 3, 4 days.
I agree with that, but it's a state referendum and I am hesitant at having somebody who's never moderated a budget meeting moderate our budget meeting for the first time without another attorney. Now, Drummond Woodsum's very large, however, all of their attorneys have niches. So while they employ lots of attorneys, they do not all do the same thing. Some do employment law, some do contract law, some do budget. And the people who do budget, there's only 3 or 4. And the person that Pat is talking about, I believe she did not moderate a budget meeting on her own. So that is last year, and that would be my concern. So I will check with Greg and we can follow up. But it would not be my recommendation to do option 3 or option 4. You would be setting, like I said, setting the budget before Anthem releases their rates, and we would not be able to either increase or decrease our budget accordingly. That is the big thing.
I think we can maybe go on past practice, meaning we've never had, in the time that I've been on the board, an issue with the public doing anything untoward toward the moderator. Well, maybe it's a risk to ask someone to.
I would like Drummond Woodsum to still do it.
No, but I'm meaning is like the girl.
Well, just because she hadn't moderated last year doesn't mean she will not have
Right.
moderated prior
Yes,
to the end of the month.
Right, and that's what I'm trying to,
She
put out
may
there.
very well have.
and if not, she may have watched him do it 10 times and.
I think it's worth, again, going back and asking.
I will ask again.
I mean, personally, that night does not work well for me, honestly, but I think for the community, it's the better of the 2 options.
I could also ask if we could move it, if he has any availability at all, moving it from, or if there's another school district that may be willing to switch with us. There's nothing written in stone that we have to have it on a Tuesday.
Exactly, it could be on the Wednesday night
I
or the
would-
Thursday night.
Right.
I honestly would
I was wondering
prefer
that.
to stick with Greg or Bill. I would hate for something to happen. Last year, we passed a huge budget increase. I expect that it's going to be a difficult budget year again because of a lot of factors. And I just would hate for something to invalidate our annual budget meeting so that we would be required to do it again. That's my opinion only.
Well, why don't you reach out to him, see what he says. I think any night the week after Memorial Day as a way of giving more days for members of the public to submit an absentee ballot would be fine. So if Tuesday night doesn't work, would Wednesday night work? It's, and let's see what their availability is. And then kind of make a decision. If they're like, oh yeah, we have Tuesday, then book it, right?
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if Greg is available that Wednesday, I'd say book it
The day of the week
Bill
doesn't, the day of the week doesn't matter to me. I'm just concerned about moving our budget meeting dates around based on votes that, the school budget votes are never well attended anyway, and I don't think moving our budget meeting a week prior is going to generate a huge increase in absentee ballots, but that's my opinion.
You know, I don't know that it will or not,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that we have to give the public the opportunity.
As much as we
As
can.
much as we can. And if we can make it 2 weeks, then I think we have the obligation to do so, given that the law changed and we have a little more flexibility with that time. So, yeah, and yeah, you and I have talked about this, so it's really kind of where I fall. And we've heard frustrations in the past from city clerks and saying that they want more time. And so this is our opportunity to be responsive to that as well.
I only remember frustration from one city clerk, and that's a new city clerk. None of the other clerks have mentioned it to me. I think we can just agree to disagree.
Okay, all right, so if you would check.
I
with him,
will check
please.
with Greg.
Thank you. Modular update, PRCS.
So the few meetings ago, we discussed the modular. We needed to sign a renewal. And I think at that point, I don't know if it was somebody on this finance committee, but one of the members of the board asked me the cost of actually purchasing the modular. So after we signed the renewal lease, I reached out to Schiave, and honestly, it took forever for him to get back to purchasing that modular. As a reminder, there are 2 modulars at Pittston. One we leased when we first closed the TC Hamlin, which is the modular that we continue to lease. That lease that we pay, we get reimbursed through the ED 279. The state allows school districts who are leasing temporary space to receive reimbursement for up to 5 years. This year that we're currently in will be our last year. So the cost of the modular, if we were to purchase it, is $312,250. And what I said to him, I don't want to buy a new one. And he said, that's a new one. That would be the used one that we have. So that would be our cost to purchase that modular, should we choose to do so. I also looked into the law regarding lease and lease purchase space. And if the board wished to move forward with purchasing this space, there is language that will allow for a reimbursement of purchase for instructional space. I don't know what the board or the finance committee wishes to do. I think that we talked amongst ourselves, Gabe, Pat and I, that typically when we are done with these, they hold no residual value. I don't know how many of you were here when we looked at getting rid of the modular at the high school. It was really struggle to find somebody to take it. So I'm not quite sure what the board wants to do, especially since we are now considering talking about doing a consolidated elementary school. But I wanted to provide the information to you.
What's our lease payment again, Angie?
$5,000 a month.
60 a year.
So if you
I
take
was
the
gonna say, if
amount,
you wanna
you
do the
divide it
math.
by 60 months, 5 years, it's 5,200 and something. So, you know, my thought is kind of back to the whole construction thing. You know, maybe in 5 years you have approval to do a consolidated school, but there's a good chance that you don't. So do you continue to pay lease because it's not going to be worth anything and you pay that for 8 years? And I'm not sure what the new amount will be, because that will have to be renegotiated, or whether we explore buying it, paying for it over 60 months, which it's gonna be, depending on the interest, it's gonna be comparable to what you're already paying.
Right.
And then it's yours at the end of 60 months, and who knows, you know, this is actually in better shape
Oh my
than
God.
that high school modular.
By far.
So
By far.
they're made by far, it is great, it's great classroom space. So, there might be a school at that time that has interest. I mean, who knows? But I would explore further what it would require us, the board, to do to purchase it, and what would an interest rate be and that sort of thing.
And maybe it's something that we talk further about once we find out where we land on the construction app. I mean, maybe.
Well, but how long is that price for? Because the construction app, you're not gonna know for over a year.
Which price was
Yeah.
that?
318.
We'll need that modular for at least 5 more years.
Yeah, and we're not even gonna know the outcome of the construction for at least a year and a half. Because if
It's gonna take 2
the
to 3 years to build
applications,
anything anyway.
right, the applications become available in the summer, or they're due in the summer, it's gonna take a year before that is even published.
And if we're guilty of anything in this district, it's taking too much care of what it is that we own or are trying to own. That piece of,
Thank
I
you.
think I should
Sorry
say.
about-
And the other section is owned, we own.
right.
the other
But
section,
that
so-
modular that we had a hard time getting rid of had been there since I've
Yeah,
been on the board, which is more than a hot minute.
In the end,
So-
if we're paying the same amount, you're better off to own it.
Yep.
Yeah.
After 5 years than to keep paying whatever lease payment we're gonna be getting,
Right.
as long as we're gonna have it for 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any,
And we'll take care of it and it will have residual value just because,
Well,
No, it doesn't.
we don't know, I mean, but we will take care of it.
Right.
it will have more than the other one did.
that's bad.
Yeah.
I don't know, anything that can sell for more than 300,000 ought to have some residual value.
You'd be surprised.
Right?
Because if it can't be worthless to us, but worth, six
Yeah.
figures to
I mean,
them.
to some
Well, they're
other
like a
school district
car.
that can't.
They don't
No.
appreciate, they depreciate,
Yeah.
so.
But they're better than a mobile home.
Well,
That's exactly, well, yeah.
I mean, they're modulars, but they're different than the modulars of yesteryear. I wouldn't want to live in one, or, I don't know, I
No,
just,
they're fine.
Yeah.
I think
Good.
modular homes have come a long way.
oh, I do too. I think that,
I think our modular pieces are.
I meant I wouldn't want to live in that classroom building.
Yeah, oh, no.
So,
and not only are we
So
gonna
do-
have it, but it's gonna be used for 5 years, right? We
Right.
have enough
Yeah.
student enrollment where
Yes.
that's gonna,
Yes.
Yes,
I'm
that's-
certain
that's
that we
not
would
gonna
find a
be a
use
problem.
for it.
so I'm good with exploring it.
I don't know, it can, I guess it can.
Megan, explore it?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Water leak. Sorry, I want to move us along.
Oh,
He
okay,
needs to
water
get to
leak.
bed. We're gonna be up very early in the morning.
What
so-
water leak?
Who has a water
We
leak?
don't have a water leak.
We reported to you that there was a water leak in
It's
the
all done now.
cafeteria.
Was that the
There
one
was-
behind the cooler?
I believe that was behind the cooler. So
That
we're
one.
here to give you a great update, right?
A great one, a happy
So-
one, or?
Happy
Yes,
one.
happy news.
Woo-hoo.
We don't need new refrigerators and freezers.
Oh, thank goodness.
That is good.
That's good.
The
news.
leak ended up being a piece of kitchen equipment, the ice maker, which is like 12 feet from the wall on the opposite side.
Uh,
But
Swear trap.
working over there and researching and checking everything out. It has, if anybody's seen one of those big ice makers with the big bin in the bottom, it constantly has ice that it's making all the time.
Mhm.
So it has like the sheet panel that's in there that the water runs down, it freezes on it, does some weird vibrating thing or something, the ice drops out, and then it just runs water over it again to flush it all out. When it runs through the cycle and the flush cycle, it probably runs through close to 5 gallons of water that it flushes through the system. And it probably does that every 30 minutes, I would say.
Jeepers.
And it's dumping that water through that system to flush anything that might be on the panel off of it and goes out a drain pipe and into the drain. Well, the unit is just sitting in the kitchen. It was never meant to be in the spot that it was, so it's not plumbed in. It has a pipe that goes across the floor, and the pipe goes across the floor and down around the corner and comes back. And was dumping onto the floor somewhere close to the drain, as close as they could.
But it wasn't.
It wasn't in the drain.
Uh-huh.
And so I redid all the piping for the drain pipe. And tried to, and rerouted some of the piping, extended some of the piping, and then you couldn't get the pipe all the way right to the drain because it's where everybody, well, it's where the kitchen staff needs to stand to run the dishwasher and the dishes, because the pipe runs underneath there. So to not create a tripping hazard, we grooved the floor, pitched it to the drain, so the water dumps out, goes underneath the mat, through a pitched area and a trough in the floor to the drain. So now the water
love
runs
this.
right down the trough into the drain, and within a week, all of the issue with the water on the floor had dropped.
Wow.
And you can tell it had been leaking probably and been that way probably since the ice maker was installed, which looks like it's something, again, from the 90s. So it's 30 years old.
So problem solved. Thank you.
Solved. We still
Kinda
do
like my
need to
kitchen floor
repair.
problem.
We do need to repair some wall that's in the cafeteria,
Yes,
which we've talked
yes.
about doing, some, it's a PVC panel board over that
Yeah.
wall to clean it all up to make it look much better, but the floor is all fine now, no issues, we're good.
Water's a funny thing.
Yeah, it was amazing, we would have never thought it would have traveled across that area like it did, but it just didn't, strange.
We had an instance like that in my kitchen. Didn't know it was happening until we stepped one day and the water came up from underneath.
Squished up.
Like squished up
Sponge.
everywhere, so then many layers of subflooring came. But hey, we figured it out. Main distributed generation consortium update.
So, because I've been here 30 years, I often forget that board members cycle on and off the board. So I want to share with you a conversation that we had with the board finance committee, probably back in 2018, 2019, when we entered this consortium agreement. So typically when you hear me talk about utilities and going out to bid, you'll hear me talking about a company called Competitive Energy Services, or CES. I rely heavily on CES and their expertise as far as the energy markets and advising me of the best times to go out to bids. It's what they do. So for those of you who are maybe into, who follow renewable energies and legislation, back in 2019, the state of Maine passed legislation that enabled the expansion of Maine's net energy billing credit program, which that allowed the projects like the huge solar farms to come online, and for the generation to go back into the grid, and for the grid to pay these customers. Well, it created opportunity for a lot of people to be able to help fund these projects and to realize some of the savings that these solar projects and other like hydro projects generated. So back in 2019, as this law was being changed, Competitive Energy Services was in the process of creating a project in a consortium. And I happened to reach out to them about the right time. They have a huge consortium of projects, all renewable energies and partners that they were getting together. Those of you who haven't heard us talk about this before, it's the who's who of large businesses in the state of Maine. So Bowdoin College, the city of Portland, school districts, LL Bean, Maine Maritime Academy, Maine General, Nestle Waters, Northern Light Healthcare System, Portland Water District, Pratt and Whitney, amongst, so it's a very exclusive membership of which we just happened to hit.
Is this the one we hopped onto it just the, yeah?
I have reached out.
You were sitting over here then.
And there was room. So at that time, they came and spoke to the board and we agreed to join this membership. So a lot of things have happened, including COVID. And a lot of these projects, they've been going on, but they're starting to ramp up and some of them have been put on hold because of COVID and other reasons. But we, in the meantime, are starting to see credits. So every month we pay some of these suppliers or people who are getting these solar farms. And in exchange, we get credits from the energy that they are creating from these solar farms and hydro farms. So I am starting to get credit statements of what we're paying in and what we're getting back. So in the folder that I've shared with you, I have shared the latest quarterly NEBC summary report that says for the quarter that this report this is dated, we received $11,000 in credits. So over the course of the year, you will see these reports and the money that we're getting credited towards our utility bills. I think it's very exciting. You know, when we talk about the district being involved in a project with renewable energy, this is our way of allowing savings for the state of Maine and allowing us to reap some benefit back to the district in the form of credits. So I wanted to share this with you because I don't think any of you were here when we first started talking about it, and to share statements with you. I get them quarterly. I will try to remember to forward them so that you can see the kind of credits it's generating. But it just occurred to me that we hadn't talked about it, and I just wanted to make you folks aware.
$11,000 is nothing to sneeze at.
In what time frame was that 11,000?
A quarter, 3 months. So, yep, and projects are continuing to come online. In addition to that, we are generating RECs, so renewable energy credits that they're also selling on our behalf. So we're also receiving income from that. So that's good news. Yep.
That's a good story.
It's a great story. It's a great story that I am glad that we are proud of. I'm proud that we are a part of.
Yeah.
I feel privileged to be included in it. So anyway, it's a way of us doing our part
Awesome.
and getting benefit. So there you go.
Way to go, Andrea. Future agenda items other than the budget?
I assume that I'm going to do, we have new board members. I assume that I'm going to do the ED 279.
Yes.
overview,
Yes,
Since we have a lot of new board members.
yes, and I think it's really also good for the public to hear it over and over and over again.
And Andrea, I was told that we should expect the ED 279 prior to the deadline date. So the deadline, I believe, is February 1st. So I would assume that means we should be receiving our ED 279 anytime soon. Are you hearing the same?
It will be a good time to talk about it. I'll have a chance to review it.
So the next meeting is on February 13th
That we've typically pushed.
to the 27th. I mean, that feels,
Long time.
that just seems like a long time from here. I cannot be here on the 13th. If
Unless-
you decide to do it on the 13th, you can have that conversation without me.
We can do that aside, but typically what we do is do the budget and that it's just a brief glimpse of the budget and the ED 279 together. The reason why we typically push it back past February vacation. It's because I need that time to finish putting the budget together. January and February are busy times upstairs. We're doing W-2s, we're doing 1094s. There's a lot of reports and things that are due. So that and the budget are both weighing on my time. In the meantime, the schools are still in the process of putting their budgets together. I was waiting for some sort of decision about when we will hold our budget meeting to make set a deadline for when their budgets would be due to central office. I know you and I talked about it briefly. Perhaps we could talk about it again so I can set definitive deadline for at least them to have their budgets to me so that I can start reviewing. We have several new administrative assistants who often require additional time beyond that deadline. So I just want to make sure that everything's in together so that I can have it to finish up on it during school vacation.
Okay.
Sorry.
May I ask a question?
You can ask the question.
We have the ED 279. What's the purple sheet?
The purple sheet is the, so you hear.
I heard it today for the first time.
Really? So the purple sheet is all of the money that is allocated for education. The purple sheet doesn't all come to us. So the purple sheet shows where so some of it goes to CATC, some of it goes to charter schools. So that form shows where all of the dollars allocated to education are spent.
And that's where the total 55% is. So then when they talk about 55% to
It's
education.
in the purple sheet.
It's in the purple sheet. It's not 55% to public school districts, right? It's broader than that.
Gotcha. So they were talking today on the legislative committee about Maine Math and Science wanting to use public funds. And that's where the purple sheet came
And to
in.
be clear, when they talk about, in addition, when they talk about 55%, it isn't 55% of our budget. It's 55% of what they think our budget.
Should be.
I don't want to say
Not
should
should.
be, or what they are willing to fund based on the number of students that we have in the district and the valuations.
And again, it's using a model that really hasn't been updated
No.
and that the PICUS report said is significantly underfunded.
This is
Agreed.
where we have too many buildings, too many.
Exactly.
Correct.
Well, that's what I was
Right.
thinking.
This is where we
Penalized
get-
because we have too many
When I
of
read the
something.
word purple sheet
Right.
in that
Which-
meeting today, I thought.
It should be, we have too many.
Wait a
but
minute.
You will see where all
We
the
still should
money
get,
is.
we still should get the full amount.
It should cost
we
more to
have.
have too many.
Well, we don't.
No, it's the same thing like with salaries.
Right.
Because our region, the regional salary is lower than she can probably explain it better than I. Where rather than getting a full 1%, you get 0.95. So we actually lose money
Yes.
away from us.
I am allergic to
Because
like
of the region
everything.
that we're in based on
They
salary.
feel we don't need as
Versus
much.
in southern Maine, they get 1.7
It's the
or.
opposite way.
Can we make a decision about our next meeting,
13th.
about our next meeting?
I think we decided we are gonna go on the 13th.
all new tires.
Yes.
I actually don't know the answer. I don't know what
You
you
said
guys
you wouldn't be
decide.
there, but
I will
to
not be
go over,
there.
will you be able to go over that ED 279 that night?
Two, I know it.
Put it.
Yeah, I think,
We can do that alone, we can do that alone.
I think that would be a good night to do that,
79 alone on the 13th.
Sure.
because there's a lot of information there.
Islanding.
We are we're going to San Diego for my
The superintendent.
superintendent's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
conference.
Yep.
And so we've got to get to Boston
And that'd be
to
good for
fly
the
out
entire
early on
board
the
to see too,
14th.
not just the finance
I
committee.
completely agree, but they don't let me hold people hostage and drag them here.
You know, people are silly, Andrea. You're done.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Andrea, thank you.